I've gotta say, I've been really into Multiversus as of late. As someone who's pretty much a diehard fan of Super Smash Bros., or just the concept of platform fighters in general, I've never felt a game hit this much of a mark for me in terms of the genre. A lot of attempts in it either have not caught my interest due to many factors, be it lack of quality, just died too soon for me to ever really give it a chance, or being whatever the fuck Brawlhalla is. There's a few exceptions to this, don't get me wrong. Games like Rivals of Aether and Slap City are good examples of ones that I play and enjoy now, but while I love those titles, they don't exactly scratch that usual itch that I'm looking for with most platform fighters, which is the crossover aspect of well-known characters. And truth be told, while I know Multiversus would have the well-known character thing down pat, I just kinda assumed Multiversus was gonna fall in that same ditch to rot and die just like Nick All-Star Brawl did. But I stood fully corrected, and it's been nothing but a blast to play every time I pick it up, and I feel like it's got crazy potential with the characters they could add, even being able to rival something like Smash's crazy lineup. Which is why, for today, our topic is going to be my top 10 most wanted characters for Multiversus. But before that, we're going to go over a few rules that I have. Rule number 1, no guest characters. For example, I'm going to strictly keep to characters that are under Warner Brothers, but never crossing the boundary of grabbing another character from another company, similar to like how Nintendo would grab a character from Sega, as we aren't entirely sure of the lengths the developers can go with getting characters like that. I will gladly make my own video on that topic if we were to start getting guest characters like that though. And rule number 2, no leaked characters. I'd be shocked if you haven't seen any of the leaked characters from when the game was first coming out and having its files ripped apart, but all of my choices are unique. So if you somehow still haven't seen the leaks from the game's files, or if you're worried about this list just being covered in characters who appear in those files, don't worry, I've got you. With those rules out of the way, we're getting right on to our first pick, that being the Scarlet Speedster from DC Comics, The Flash. For as cool of a character as I and many other people think Flash is, I'm a little surprised that not many people consider him to be a decent contender for a character slot in this game, except for the Twitter page that's currently dedicated to rooting for them. Shout out to you, you're cool as fuck. I've got a little bit of a history with shitting on the character over the years, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't have a ton of love for him and the concept of speedsters in general. For example, Sonic the Hedgehog, Flash obviously, Rainbow Dash, fucking Speedy Gonzalez, any fucker that's known for their speed has always had a soft spot in my heart. When coming to the decision of picking Flash for the list, I tasked myself with picking at least one Justice League character that isn't already in the game, specifically from the original 7. And of those 7, there was Green Lantern, Martian Manhunter, Aquaman, and obviously the Flash. Green Lantern's cool, but he's never really interested me that much. Aquaman is honestly one of my favorite DC characters of all time, but admittedly as a reveal and in playstyle he'd be a little boring, and I think other characters on this list would make a lot more sense and would hype fans up more. And for Martian Manhunter, honestly, if it weren't for the fact that I thought Flash would probably have a tiny bit more of an interesting moveset, I probably would have put Martian on this list as well, considering I like him pretty much as Flash. But, oh well. Getting into how I think Flash as a character would play, however, Flash would definitely be an assassin type character, dealing small amounts of damage, but using his speed to an advantage, as he's able to build up damage extremely quickly using fast punches and kicks, until he's able to get an opponent to a high enough percentage to kill. I think Flash would even have some interesting specials to go off of. For his up special, if done mid-air, he'd use his tornado arms, where he'd swing his arms rapidly at the ground until creating a tornado, which would allow him to boost himself or an ally back into the sky. If done on the ground, he would instead run around very quickly in circles, and would be able to make the tornado even more powerful the longer you hold the input, but it would pretty much act the same way it does in the air, aside from doing more damage to opponents the more it's charged up. For an interesting down special, Flash would start vibrating his molecules so fast where he becomes untouchable for a very short period of time. He wouldn't be able to attack in this state, but it would give him chances to escape from situations that might seem a little dire, and allies who pass through him would also gain this ability, but the cooldown on the ability itself would be extremely long, and the more you try to spam it, the less time Flash gets to spend in this form. Getting into some costume ideas, his base costume would be Wally West with his Rebirth design, my personal favorite Flash design. Another obvious choice would be his DCAU costume, along with changing his electricity color to be somewhat more to a yellow color instead of a blue or white. Kid Flash would also have to be a skin as well, noting back to Wally's earlier days, and to throw in an extra, Reverse Flash. You can't ignore a character like Reverse Flash for a skin slot if you're putting in the Flash. I'm not sure which version of the Reverse Flash you'd go with, but he would be here regardless. Next on our list, we have Rick's favorite grandchild and Morty's kind of a dickhead sister, Summer. Having finally caught up with Rick and Morty and absolutely loving the show despite some recent controversies, I knew immediately that I wanted to put Summer on this list. While she isn't my absolute favorite character from the show, she's one whose presence I enjoyed almost every time she popped up on the screen, and out of all the characters currently in the show, I feel like she'd make the most sense to get in, and she'd have more than enough to pull from for a full moveset in this game. I would make Summer something of a ranged bruiser type character, having enough options to cover all ranges fairly well with little trouble, using stuff like the double-sided beam sword that a Clone Summer gets in the Clone episode, to stuff like her Wolverine claws, which don't look anything like Wolverine's claws but are more like X-23's, but I digress. And for an example of long-ranged options, the twin guns that she gets in Season 2 Episode 4 are a perfect example. An idea I had for one of her special attacks was kinda weird in concept and could be seen as broken depending on how you use it, but here it goes anyways. You know that memory wiping gun Rick has and used in Morty's Mind Blowers? Yeah, we're just gonna say Summer stole that and now uses it for one of her specials. It'll fire a short-ranged flash of light that doesn't last more than half a second, but if it hits an opponent, it'll make the opponent forget how to use a random special move for a set period of time. So for example, if you're off stage and you get hit by it and lose your up special, you better hope that your up special was borderline useless in the first place because you are indeed losing a life. To make up for how broken this move might seem on paper, the charge time for it would be quite long, as I'm sure having a move that allows you to get rid of your opponent's special attacks, and a random one at that, would cause some outrage in the community for sure. And to get Summer's costumes out of the way, the first alternate costume she'd have is Cronenberg Summer, or Original Summer from the Cronenberg universe as they call it, which is simply the Summer from the Prime universe that got left behind by Rick and Morty. Next on the list is Deathstalker Summer, from that really odd Mad Max episode where Morty gets the big ass arm. Lastly, to keep up with the trend of Rick and Morty characters all having 3 skins along with their original outfit, we're gonna give Summer her Gotron outfit. Ever so gracefully entering into the scene, Pearl from Steven Universe makes her way onto my list. If you didn't know this about me, then you're gonna learn right now that I absolutely adore Steven Universe. It's in my top 5 of all time in terms of cartoons, and easily sits upon my top 10 favorite pieces of fiction ever. The characters are funny and easy to get attached to, the story's amazing, the art style is vibrant and full of life, and don't even get me fucking started on that music. It is an almost perfect show in every way. So when I saw that Steven and Garnet were both going to get into base game Multiversus, I was more than a little happy, to say the least. Knowing all of that, how would I not want to put another Steven Universe character in this fucking game? Especially if they're part of the core 4 characters of the series. Pearl would be an assassin type character, using her light and quick yet deadly attacks to quickly rack up damage on foes, while also being able to outrange most other assassin characters with her normal attacks due to the length of her spear. For one of her special attacks, I was thinking she could summon one of her Holo Pearls, and something similar to Zero's duplicate super in Marvel vs. Capcom 3, she'd have one of her Holo clones follow behind her, doing her exact moves that delay a little bit, but just enough to give her a second hit on any attack that she uses, which would not only be good for doing potentially flashy combos, but would also give her a better time building up damage on opponents, considering she'd probably be one of the weaker characters doing damage on the field. Another special idea that I had, which would probably be her neutral special, would be these energy blasts that she can shoot out of her spears, which would give her access to a pretty decent projectile. And considering that Pearl's also pretty good at dodging and parrying and countering other people's attacks, I think a special move dedicated to her dodging or parrying an opponent's attack just to deliver her own would be pretty perfect for her character. Onward to some skin ideas. I think her base game skin should be the current regeneration that she gets in the Change Your Mind episode, while keeping her original first regeneration from when the show first started as an alternate costume. Another fun skin idea I had would be to make Water Pearl a skin for Pearl, the Pearl that shows up when Lapis makes her first formal appearance in the show. And lastly, she'd get her original formation outfit from when she was still serving under Pink Diamond. When it comes to a crossover aspect, I am a huge stickler for having main characters come in first and foremost. Don't get me wrong, I adore characters like Spinel, Peridot, and Lapis, and I think Spinel might actually be in my top 3 characters for Steven Universe in general, but when it comes to getting a series in a game like this, I would prefer to have the faces of said series lead the charge, and then have other supporting characters come in later. With that being said, with what I just mentioned, you should have known this was coming. The tough and lovable runt Amethyst joins my list. As I just mentioned in Pro's rundown, I'm really stuck on the thought of having the main characters of any franchise represent a series before any of the side characters. And obviously with that rule, I couldn't leave out Amethyst. Also considering she's my favorite character in the entire series, even without that self-imposed rule, she'd make it here regardless. Amethyst would make a perfect ranged bruiser character. A character who could not only keep her foes away from a pretty far distance if needed with her whip, but has a lot of ways of getting in your face and doing some hard-hitting attacks up close. Starting off with her special moves, obviously we gotta give her a spin dash attack, where she'll curl up her entire body Sonic and Tails style and start rolling forward for a hard-hitting charge attack. In the show, she was able to make an even more powerful version of this by igniting her whips and basically setting herself ablaze. I could see that being the max charge version of the move, leaving a bit of a lingering flame effect on the floor, which would act like other fire attacks in the game, just causing small damage over time. Speaking of the flaming whip, I would give her a straightforward whip attack that would be used to grab foes and enemies alike. You could angle this move in the air or on the ground, and if you charge it up long enough, the whip would be set ablaze, in which it would lose its grab property, but would become a hard-hitting flame-inducing attack that would take a while to build up, but would kill pretty early if it hit an opponent. In terms of her alternate costumes, her main one would be her current regeneration from Change Your Mind, just like Pearl. Her second one would be her previous regeneration with a white shirt, specifically the version where she ties her hair in a bun during a fight with Steven. And her last alternate costume would be Purple Puma, because Purple Puma is based as fuck. Obviously you would have to change the properties of how, tall Purple Puma is to fit current Amethyst height, but that doesn't seem like much of an issue really. Hey look, it's Kid Goku! I meant, KO from, KKO. Sorry. Now I will say, I'm still in the middle of watching OKKO, and while I am loving it, my knowledge on it is still somewhat limited, and going off of what I would know, you'd wonder why I put a character in here if I don't really know too much about them, right? Well, first off, I don't need to know every fucking thing about a character just to put them in here. If I like them, I like them, and they're getting on the list. And second of all, I just like cartoon characters, and out of all the characters I've featured on this list so far, I believe KO has the most bombastic and entertaining personality and would be really fun to listen to and just watch being played in Multiversus, if he ever got in. KO would be a straight-to-the-punch, no pun intended, bruiser character, using a mix of martial arts techniques and special power moves to get in for some heavy pressure on unexpected foes. For starters, obviously his main power move, the Power Fist, is going to be his neutral special. Simply tapping the special button over and over would allow KO to shoot out as many Power Fists as he'd like, though in the show it's shown that he's able to use the even stronger purple Power Fists. So to give that move some unique properties, I'd say if you hold it, you'd be able to charge up and store up a purple Power Fist that you can launch out an opponent, doing lots of damage if it connects. I'm also aware of the mobile game Lakewood Plaza Turbo giving him some more interesting moves to use as specials, so I'm gonna go with those, like his Power Battle Yell, which could be used to either destroy oncoming projectiles or do small range consistent damage around KO when there's enemies. Something kind of akin to like a burst option. He'd also have a ground slam attack from that game. In that game it doesn't work exactly the same as how I'd make it work in this, but for this game when he hits the ground with his fists, he would send out a shockwave that would make any opponent near him get stunned for a few seconds. And getting into some of his costume ideas, his base skin I believe should be MKO or Merged KO, his current form before the ending of the time skip in OKKO. Next would be TKO, or Turbo KO, KO's dark alternate ego that ended up manifesting from all of KO's negative emotions. And for the final costume, we're gonna go with PKO, or Perfect KO, the form that KO takes when he and TKO are in perfect balance and end up taking control of KO's body at the same time to fight. And that's all about I have for KO. Now we're gonna move from one powerhouse right into another. Showing up at our halfway point in the list, we've got Starfire from DC, specifically from the Teen Titans show. Out of the entire main cast, it's genuinely pretty hard to pick a favorite character from the animated DC show. Considering all of the main 5 Titans are so well beloved and well written, it's pretty hard to get a definitive answer for who's the best out of the entire team, but in my case, I think the fact that Starfire could even break the top 2 says mountains about her character and how much I like her. In terms of character type, I think she'd be something of a mage, using her Starbolt powers to shoot out I-beams and green blast to keep her foes away, and summoning shields to protect her allies. One idea I had for her specials, as I mentioned, would be the use of her I-beams that would shoot straight outwards. Unlike Superman's, these wouldn't curve and wouldn't cause an explosion after they've left their initial contact area, but instead, Starfire would dart up shortly into the air and stare at an angle, shooting the beams, using them more as a way to wall off foes from getting to her teammate. These I-beams would last a little longer than Superman's and would allow her to move back and forth for better coverage, but she could obviously get hit out of this, and she can't instantly cancel out of the animation, so it'd be a very tricky move to use. Her shield special would act something similar to Urian's Aegis Reflector from the Street Fighter series, a slow-moving wall that would inflict damage to anyone who touches it. It's a weak shield, however, so it can be deleted by other shield moves, like Steven's shield attack for example, after making contact with it, but to make up for it, Star can summon 2 of these at the same time. She'd also get a special where if you just hold the special button, she'd be able to consistently shoot out Starbolt energy blasts. You'd be able to angle the blast in any direction you'd need to stop foes from getting in. However, it would eventually begin to slow down and the cooldown would be quite long if you want to hold it again for another long period of time. For her costumes, obviously we're going to start with the 2013 version of the character, which is the one that we're basing the entire character around. So with that in mind, that means we can include her sister as an alternate costume, Blackfire, or Cormander. And finally, to get some comic love in there, we're going to pick her Super Son's comic appearance outfit. Alright, cool. Starfire's out of the way. Now then, let's see what brave-hearted hero is next up on my list. Melmo from Melmo's Heroes of Pure Heart braves the challenge and makes his way onto my list. I swear, this character and KO are ones that I have such limited knowledge on, but at the same time, I love them a little too much. And I think I like Melmo a little more. This dude just oozes so much fucking personality that it's a little intoxicating. Look at this dude's smile. How could you not love a character like this? He's fucking precious. Melmo here would be an assassin character, wielding his golden katana and using it to strike foes quickly and build up some sweet damage on whoever decides to face him head on. I think it'd be cute as fuck to have a Dora bet somewhere in his moveset. She's too cute for me not to want to involve her in some way, and considering how much trouble she'd get into, I'd kinda think it makes sense for her to just somehow stumble into Melmo's fight and do something that actually ends up helping him instead of, causing trouble. Regardless of that, for some of his specials, getting this one right out the way, Melmo's Lunar Lash would definitely be his neutral special. A move that allows Melmo to gather light into his katana and shoot it out in one big slash. This move can be chargeable and can be released at any point, but at full charge is when it's at its strongest and has the most reach, though it also takes the longest to come out. I know this wouldn't be the most exciting down special in the world, but there's this move that Melmo does in one episode where he comes crashing down with his katana and causes a shockwave. I think on its own it would be pretty boring, but something fun you could do is if you charge up your neutral B, you could come crashing down with it and cause an even more expansive shockwave by expending the power you used from charging up. And finally, I also want to find a way to fit his golden form somehow into his moveset, by having Melmo eat a shit ton of Cobbler and activating his golden true form. This form wouldn't last the longest, but Melmo's speed and power would be boosted to a dramatic amount. He'd also have access to the golden energy punch, which for lack of a better word would probably kill you within 2 hits. But using that punch at any given time would take away the form immediately, no matter how early or late you decide to use it. For Melmo's costumes, there's not really too much to go off of in the show, so I decided to first go with his original teen outfit costume, sporting mostly green and a slightly happier face. And lastly, I'd just give him this suit that he wears. It's not much, but it's something to work with. Bringing in another DC character onto the list, and the final DC character on the list to be exact, Beast Boy. If Starfire was breaking the top 2 in the characters I loved the most in the Teen Titans, then Beast Boy is easily sitting at number 1, and it's not even close. It also doesn't help that he's probably, just in general, in my top 5 DC characters of all time. The show obviously helps with that, but it's also just the fact that I think his powers are super interesting, and out of all the original Titans, I think he has the most unique powers to work with for a game like this. I was considering making him a mix between a tank and a mage, considering how many animals he can transform into, but I think a tank works just fine for him, as he's more known for really big and tanky, no pun intended, animals for his transformations. Due to his smaller physical body, he'd actually be quite light, but once you start using more of his stronger moves and special attacks, you'll be granted with things like more weight, power, and super armor to really earn that tank status. For one of his specials, it'd be his main gimmick to transform into a full-on animal, and for this animal, I think a gorilla would be a good choice, as it's probably one of his most iconic animal transformations. As mentioned before, this form would give Beast Boy access to stronger attacks, super armor on some of his moves, and an increased weight, causing him to take less knockback from many attacks. The downsides of this form should be somewhat apparent, however. Unlike his normal form, the gorilla form would be much slower in movement and attack speed, and while this wouldn't hinder the usage of any of Beast Boy's moves, as he'd still have access to all of them probably, it's more so the fact that they come out really slow, so you'd have to decide between doing less damage but moving a lot quicker to get out of a situation, or transforming to get a good kill on an opponent. Another idea for a special I had for Beast Boy was him turning into a tiger and acting as something of a command grab, where he'll lunge out at you, and if he grabs you, he'll maul you for a little bit to build up damage, and then he'll be able to toss you in any direction of his choosing, leading into some pretty interesting combos if you set it up right. Moving on to some of his alternate costumes, the first one I want to pick is the 2016 version of his Young Justice design, which is my personal favorite Beast Boy design. This is actually one of the things I really like about Multiversus. You really don't have to stick to one version of the character, you can really dip your hand into any continuity you'd like and then just call it a day. But obviously, I'm not gonna call it a day because we have alternate costumes to add, just like the 2003 cartoon design, which is still pretty fucking good to this day. And lastly, I think we can go with the John Boy Mayer's design for Beast Boy, which is also a frontrunner for probably his best design. We're getting really close to the number 1 spot now, but just before that, we've got one more character left, and that's gonna be... the body morphing Evo from Generator Rex. This was one of the Cartoon Network shows I'd almost watched regularly and religiously as a child every weekend, but unlike most other shows, I never got around to re-watching it, so I don't remember too much of it. Though I'll always remember Rex being such a badass. He was one of the few characters in cartoons where I legitimately looked at him and thought his character and his powers both appeal to me on a fucking high level. It's insane. I could see Rex being something of a tank bruiser hybrid, being able to take on a good amount of hits with little issues, and also being able to dish out just as much damage when he's ready to go on the offensive. If you've ever watched the show at all, then I think it'd be pretty obvious on what his special moves could be, like his smack hands being his basic neutral special, giving Rex access to these large nanite formed hands, giving him increased range and attack power. His up special would be his boogie peg. 2 giant nanite jets that propel out of his back that propel him pretty fucking high into the air considering their size. I'd want to make his down special the slam cannon, but it would only work on the ground due to it needing some form of solid material to fire out a projectile. While he's in the air, it would just be him slamming down his smack hands into the ground for a nice ground pound. A mechanic I think would be nice to give to Rex to balance him out somehow is just like in the show, or at least earlier parts of it, overuse of the nanites would cause Rex to stop being able to use them altogether. Granted, the cooldown isn't super long, and Rex still has a bunch of other moves at his disposal that he can use to fight back, but it would be recommended that you don't overuse your abilities, as it would leave Rex without some of his most useful tools. I'm not gonna lie to you, I had a really hard time finding anything for alternate costumes, but searching a little deeper I was able to find just some things to work out, like Rex here in a Providence outfit, with this black cloth covering his mouth and nose, which I think look really sick. There's this power suit that I saw him wearing, which is pretty cool, and I was debating on this one, but his last alt would be his Omega Nanite suit from near the end of the series. Here we are, the final character. I wonder who it could be. Actually, what the fuck am I wondering? I'm the one who wrote it. I know who it is. And spoilers, I might be cheating a little bit here.
To my punching spree, this is where I lay waste and you'll go home bleeding. Didn't have to be this way, should have stayed out of the fray. Now you're heading for a beating.
I did say I was cheating. Team Ruby from Ruby. And no, I'm not saying the entire team is one playable character. I'm talking just the entirety of Team Ruby are my most wanted characters for Multiversus, bar fucking none. I guess I should have changed this to like a top 13, huh? Whatever, it doesn't matter now. I get to gush about Ruby for a little bit, so that makes me happy. This whole show and I basically grew up together. The questionable quality of the seasons currently going on aside, this whole series has such a special place in my heart, and all of the main cast mean a lot to me. Seeing how they made it into a certain other fighting game as well, I think it'd be sick to see them in this different take of the fighting game genre. In fact, in Multiversus I think they would shine out more considering their fleshed out personalities would definitely bounce off better with some of the other characters in this game. As for each of their archetypes, Ruby would be a bruiser, Weiss would be a mage, Blake would be a ranged assassin, and Yang would be a tank. Ruby would specialize in being able to get in and out of situations easily with her semblance, Petal Burst, a means of getting from place to place. Weiss, having access to Ice Dust, will be able to use that to keep distance between her and her foes, while also using glyphs to assist her allies with recoveries. Blake would excel at keeping a good distance between her and her opponents, using her Gamble Shroud to slash from afar, while also using her Shadow ability to keep her opponent guessing where she is at all times. Yang would be all in your face at all times, with a projectile, but mostly punching first and asking questions later, and using her semblance not only to be able to tank hits from an opponent, but make their power her own. On to some special move ideas. Ruby would have a Gun Blast attack, which allows her to turn her Crescent Rose into gun form and shoot out bullets, and one that I mentioned before, Petal Burst, an invulnerable dash that would go through projectiles and enemies alike. While not causing any damage, if it were to touch an ally, it would drag them along into the dash, bringing them wherever Ruby ends up, and giving them the same amount of invulnerability. I'm not going to be including the Silver Eyes as they're pretty much useless to your everyday fighter in Multiversus. Moving on to Weiss, she'd use her Ice Dust to its fullest potential, having a special that can be charged, launching out giant spikes of ice on the ground which would inflict the freeze status onto a foe. Another special idea I had would be for her to charge up an ice sword that would target onto and launch at foes when it's fully charged. Also, as I mentioned previously with Weiss, she would have a glyph special that would allow her to put glyphs on the floor, which when they're touched that would allow you or your allies to move faster, or she can put them in the air, which when touched by Weiss or her ally would allow them to get an extra wall jump, or just something to cling onto if they don't have such a good recovery, and if an opponent were to get near them it would just act like a wall of sorts. Next up on the list, Blake. Using her shadow semblance, she would easily be able to confuse her enemies. She can either send out a shadow clone and then push it forward, or just leave a clone out with a certain dust attached to it similar to how Baby Tag did it. For example, if an opponent were to touch a fire dust clone, they would get set on fire and get the fire status ability, and so on and so forth with other elements. I could also see her having a really good recovery special. Considering how far her Gamble Shroud could reach vertically, it would need to be put in the fucking NBA because holy shit, that recovery could be broken. Lastly, moving on to Yang, she would be the textbook definition of a brick wall with legs. She may not look it, but she can take many hits and dish them back out twice as hard with her semblance, Burn. This ability would allow her to take damage, and over time, she would be able to somewhat transform into a more powered up version of herself, dealing double the amount of normal damage she'd do without the boost. Though, to have this not broken, instead of having it just build up upon hitting her, I would give her this blocking special, where she holds her hands in front of her, and any hit that she ends up taking will build up a meter, as a way to reference the show's later renditions of her where she doesn't just randomly burst out into anger. She wouldn't be able to move in the blocking state, but she would be able to block mid-air to block any incoming attacks. Though this block isn't negating damage, you would mostly just take half damage from any attack that hits you, but again, that's not really stopping you from just getting hit in general. And then one of her more obvious specials would be her using her Ember Celica to shoot out curved shotgun blasts. I'll tell you right now, you're gonna have a hell of a time trying to knock out Yang. Even though she is a tank, it doesn't mean she's slow. In fact, she's pretty agile in the show. So working that into her somewhat nimble nature with a close range style would be dangerous to go against. Last up, all of their costumes. These have to be the easiest costumes to choose from out of all the characters on this list, as all the characters change their costumes pretty frequently in the show. Their main costume is going to be from their original Season 1 costumes, followed by their Season 4 costumes as alts, and then their Season 7 costumes. Easy peasy. But no, seriously, Tony, I know there's like no promises for characters, but if you're watching this, and you somehow get any and all of these characters in the game, I promise you'll see me winning an Evo at some point. That's a hardcore promise. And that's a wrap. That was my top 10 most wanted characters for Multiversus. As I was recording this, I kinda watched the game dwindle down over time, and there was news about how the game's being taken offline for an actual release. And while I have my own gripes with this issue, like having seasons roll out during an open beta, or the fact that there were deluxe packs that you could buy even though, as it fully stands, the game isn't fully out yet, and I was dumb enough to buy one of said packs, I still believe the game's devs do love the game that they're working on. And there's probably some behind the scenes shit that I'm not aware about, but that all aside, I'm still excited for the full release. And I want to see this game grow again. I want to see it succeed so badly because it has such crazy potential. And I will be here every step of the way, Multiversus. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Yo, welcome to today's end card, or this video's end card. I don't know why, it doesn't matter. I hope you're having a good day. This video was really fun for me to make. It took me a while. I meant to get this out, like, as Stripe was coming out, which was a long while ago, but, you know, busy shit was happening, but I'm glad I was able to get it out regardless. My next video is going to be unique, as it's going to be a review on a game. I'm not going to say which game it is, but I'm excited to get that one out. It's also going to be very experimental, so I hope you guys are able to stick around for that. But aside from that, yeah, this was fun. This was very fun. I will be doing more top 10s very soon. I'm not sure on what topics, but I will find something because they're enjoyable to make. They're good way to waste time. But yeah, that was fun. I will see you guys in the next video. Have a wonderful day.